At 32, my father mocked my career as a consultant, but when his failing company was acquired by mine, he realized his mistake. His son had saved him. 32 years old and still pursuing fantasies. My father's words pierced through the Thanksgiving dinner conversation like a dagger. Everyone at the table became silent. That awkward quiet that occurs when someone says something so harsh that no one knows whether to laugh or turn away. When will you get a real job, Ethan? I glanced up from my dish of turkey and stuffing. My father, James Parker, sat at the head of the table, like a monarch holding court. 60 years old, hands rough after 35 years of work. Working outside has left my face weathered. He was wielding a fork at me like a weapon. He went on to discuss construction, getting up to his point. That is, actual job. Look at your brothers. Chris is now a foreman with a team of 15. Michael oversees 3 job locations. But you, he said, laughing. Actually laughed. What are you even doing? Consultant. That is not a job. That is a fancy term for jobless. My uncles, Dad's brothers John and David, moved uneasily in their chairs. My mother Linda stared down at her plate, her knuckles white around her fork. My brothers, Christopher and Michael, exchanged looks. Chris grinned. Michael at least had the courtesy to appear sorry. My Aunt Sarah attempted to deflect the subject. Linda. The turkey is amazing. I am serious. Dad interrupted, leaning forward. 32 years old. When I was 32, I already had 2 children and bought a home. I was constructing stuff. Real objects, buildings, structures and stuff you can touch. But Ethan sits at coffee cafes with his laptop, pretending to be a businessman. Uncle John laughed. Aunt Sarah's husband, Charles, chuckled into his wineglass. Everyone was staring at me now, waiting to see how I'd respond, whether I'd defend myself or simply accept it as usual. I smiled and took a drink of wine before carefully setting down my glass. You are completely correct, Dad, I said gently. I am clearly not doing serious work. He didn't get the satire. He never did. Finally he slapped the table. The boy acknowledges it. Perhaps there is hope for you yet. Chris, do you believe your organization is hiring? Perhaps we might find Ethan a job as a laborer, start from the bottom and work your way up like a true man. More laughs around the table. I checked my watch. 7:03 p.m. 4 minutes. What my father didn't know, and none of them knew, was that I had spent the previous 6 years creating something from nothing. I started in a Seattle studio apartment with a used laptop, ramen, and ambition, building software to optimize supply chain logistics for construction enterprises. My first client was a small contractor from Portland. He paid me $600 to improve his inventory system. It saved him $40,000 the first year. Word spread. Within 20 months I had 26 clients. Within 4 years I established offices in 4 locations and 38 workers. Within 6 years, I had established the leading construction logistics consulting business on the West Coast. Last year I sold it to Stratton Global Industries for $50 million. I didn't notify my family since I knew this would happen. My father would ultimately go too far, mocking me in front of everyone and stating unequivocally that no matter what I accomplished, it would never be enough. And I had been preparing for just this. Tell us what you do again, Ethan, Uncle David asked, beaming. Is it synergy, disruption, or one of the other words? Strategic consulting? I spoke evenly. Dad discussed supply chain optimization, process improvement, digital transformation, and translation. Nothing. He does nothing. Chris laughed. Come on, Dad. Grant him some credit. He presumably creates PowerPoint presentations. That is something. Dad went on with his day. Men constructed with their hands. We did not require computers to tell us how to accomplish our tasks. We recently completed them. I looked at my mom. She stared at her plate, her lips pulled together in a narrow line. She had heard this speech before. Hell, I had heard this speech before. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas and family event over the last 6 years. However, this year was different. 4 months ago I discovered something unusual. My father's construction company, Parker & Sons Construction, the business he'd dedicated his life to and was most proud of, was faltering badly. They had lost 2 important contracts to competitors who used superior project management tools. They'd gone over budget on 3 distinct assignments owing to inadequate logistics. They were losing money. The company had been acquired by Stratton Global Industries, the same corporation that had purchased my consulting firm, and I was now the chief strategy officer, with ownership, a corner office, and decision-making power over all divisions in North America. My dad had no idea. He had no idea his firm had been acquired 7 months prior. He grumbled about the new ownership, management structure, and policies at every Sunday meal. The ones I stopped going to 4 months ago because I was too busy at work. So, when my mother called 2 weeks ago to invite me to Thanksgiving, I had already made a call. Andrew, I told Andrew Collins, CEO of Stratton Global, that I needed a favor sitting at this table as my father was gradually destroying me in front of my whole extended family. I checked my watch again. 7:05 p.m. 2 minutes. You understand what your problem is, Ethan? Dad was adding. You never learned the value of hard work, and we gave you everything. You're almost 32 years old, you drive a 12-year-old Honda, and you rent an apartment. You went to college and came back thinking you were too good for honest labor. You don't have a girlfriend because what woman wants a man who can't provide? You're a disappointment, Ethan. Someone had to say it, and the silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Aunt Sarah looked horrified, my mother's eyes welled up with tears, and Uncle John appeared uncomfortable. Chris and Michael both stared at their plates, but my father just sat there satisfied with himself, as if he'd done me a favor by publicly humiliating me. I smiled, the easiest smile I'd ever worn. Interesting? I said quietly. 7:06 p.m., 1 minute. What's interesting? Dad asked. Your definition of success. The assumption that because you don't understand what I do, it must not be valuable. I understand exactly what you do, Dad said. Nothing. Dad. Come on, Michael said. That's enough. No, it's fine, I said, still smiling. Let him speak. I want everyone to hear this. Dad's face darkened. You think you're smart because you went to college? Because you use big words? Let me tell you something. The doorbell rang and everyone froze. Who is that? My mother inquired, appearing perplexed. Everyone's here. I invited someone, I replied nonchalantly, checking my watch once more. 7:07 p.m., just on time. I hope that's all right, Mom. You invited someone? Dad's voice dripped with disdain. Great. Probably one of your jobless coffee shop pals. I rose up and said, I'll get it. Sit down. I'll get it, Mom said, already standing. No, Mom, let me. I approached the door and opened it. Andrew Collins, 52, appeared on the front porch in a fitted charcoal suit that probably cost more than my Honda. He looked like he'd walked out of a Forbes magazine shoot, with silver hair, sharp features, and a commanding presence. Rachel Harris, our CFO, stood behind him in a burgundy dress, while Victoria Bennett, our VP of Operations, wore a black pantsuit. Good evening, Ethan, Andrew replied cordially. We apologize for being late. Traffic on Interstate 5 was a nightmare. No problem at all, I answered. Come in. I led them into the dining room. Andrew brought an expensive bottle of wine. Rachel had a bouquet of flowers, and Victoria held a covered dish that smelled like honey-glazed ham. Every eye in the house followed them as they entered. Everyone, I continued. These are Andrew Collins, Rachel Harris, and Victoria Bennett. They work with me. Oh, very sweet, my mother remarked, puzzled but polite. Please sit down, we have lots of food. Dad scarcely looked up. So, these are the consulting guys? Sure, fit in someplace. Andrew's eyes roamed the table until they fell on me, at which point his entire manner transformed, from casual, pleasant to something between shock and true dread. His back straightened, and his smile evaporated. Sir, he continued, his tone suddenly serious and even respectful. I didn't know you mentioned family dinner. I didn't know. He paused, looked around the table, returned my gaze and bowed slightly. Mr. I apologize for the intrusion, Parker, he added. If I had known this was your family I would have. It's all right, Andrew, I responded gently. Sit down, everyone. This is Andrew Collins. He is the CEO of Stratton Global Industries. Uncle David's fork clattered on his plate. And Rachel Harris, Chief Financial Officer, and Victoria Bennett, Vice President of Operations for North American Divisions. Chris's face began to lose color. Michael stared at me, his mouth slightly open. Dad just sat there, fork halfway into his mouth, motionless. Wait, Uncle John responded softly. Stratton Global. That's the corporation that acquired Parker & Sons. That's correct, I said, returning to my chair. 6 months ago, $5 million acquisition, part of Stratton's strategic expansion into Pacific Northwest construction services. Everyone turned to stare at my father, who was still transfixed, his face varying from red to white to grayish. Dad works there now, I answered casually. How is the new management treating you, by the way? I heard some restructuring announcements were coming next month. Andrew caught on right away. I watched the knowledge dawn in his eyes, and his face changed from professional to colder, more calculating. Mr. Robert Parker, Andrew continued, his voice bland but with an edge. I wasn't aware you were related to our top strategy officer, the man who designed the entire acquisition, the man who has ultimate say on division budgets, hiring choices, and operational restructuring. The hush was total. My father murmured, "Wait." And his voice broke. I said, "You are my boss's boss's boss." Yes. Rachel leaned over and murmured something to Andrew, who nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving my father. Mr. Parker, Andrew continued, I've been examining the Q3 performance reports. Your division, the historic Parker & Sons contracts, has underperformed expectations. Margins are down 14%. There has been debate about eliminating superfluous personnel in that section. Redundant? My dad's voice was scarcely heard. But, of course, Andrew continued, staring at me. I'm sure your kid would not want us to make any hurried judgments concerning his father's career. Would you, Ethan? Everyone in the room was now looking at me, waiting. My mother's hand covered her mouth. Chris seemed to want to disappear into his chair. Michael's face had become absolutely pale. Aunt Sarah's eyes were wide, something between dread and interest. I took a drink of wine, let the moment to breathe, and let them all sit in it. Tell me, Dad, I eventually murmured, putting down my drink. What did you say about actual work? His lips opened and closed, producing no sound. Because I'm trying to understand, I said, my voice calm and even compassionate. I want to make sure I have this right. Construction is a genuine job. Building things with your hands is beneficial. But strategic consultancy, supply chain optimization, and digital transformation are nothing. That's a ruse. Is that accurate? Dad's Adam's apple bobbed. He couldn't make words. Here's what I find intriguing, I replied. The reason Parker & Sons was losing money, and you were going to go bankrupt, was because your project management was stuck in 1995. You were still completing paper requisition forms. You used Excel spreadsheets to track inventories. You were losing thousands of dollars every job because no one knew where your goods were or when they'd arrive. Andrew nodded. The due diligence report was lengthy. So, when Stratton purchased you, I said, what did they do? They hired consultants, people like me, who use laptops in coffee shops and create PowerPoint presentations. And do you know what happened? My father was gazing at me, and I couldn't interpret his expression. Shock, fear, or embarrassment. Your division's margins increased by 8% in the first quarter under new management, and I said, all because someone implemented the kind of pretend work you just mocked me for doing. Victoria spoke up, and the digital inventory system alone saved $150,000 in the third quarter. But that's not real work, right, Dad? I stood up slowly and told you what real work is. Spending 6 years building a company from nothing, working 100-hour weeks to prove a concept everyone said was stupid, and earning every single client through results rather than inheritance. Chris blanched at that. Real work, I added, is transforming a failed company concept into a lucrative purchase. Managing 52 direct reports across 6 states is real work, as is sitting in boardrooms making choices that touch thousands of families, including yours. The room was so silent that I could hear the kitchen clock tick. But you're correct about one thing, I said. I drive a 12-year-old Honda because I don't have anything to prove with a car. I rent an apartment because I travel 40 weeks a year, and it seems silly to purchase a house I'd never live in. I don't have a partner because I've been too busy pursuing the profession you just informed me doesn't exist. My mother was weeping now, tears flowing down her cheeks. I addressed Andrew, Rachel, and Victoria, turning to face them. Thank you for coming, but I think we should leave. I'm not hungry anymore. Of course, sir, Andrew said, rising up instantly. Rachel and Victoria followed suit. As I approached the door, my father finally found his words. Wait, Ethan, please. I came to a complete halt and gently turned around. Yes, you did, Dad. You always mean it. That is the problem. I tried to inspire you. Motivate me. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Dad, I sold my company for $50 million. I also possess ownership in Stratton Global worth $15 million. I made more last year than you would during your whole lifetime. But none of it matters to you since I don't use a hammer. Uncle John had his face in his hands, Aunt Sarah was gazing at me as if she'd never seen me before, and Chris and Michael both seemed ill. I didn't tell you any of this because I wanted you to be proud of me for who I am, not what I produce, I said, my voice becoming more steady. But you cannot do so. You can't see beyond your personal concept of success to acknowledge that your son may have accomplished anything. Ethan, please, my mother begged gently. Don't leave like this. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't sit at a table where I'm openly mocked for my career while the CEO of a billion-dollar company literally bows to me. I glanced at my father once again, and he was smaller, shrunk. The guy who had seemed so enormous, so certain, so righteous, suddenly appeared old, confused, and little. You want to know why I don't attend Sunday meals anymore, Dad? Here's why. Because no matter what I do, it will never be enough for you. So I quit trying. Andrew unlocked the front door, and cold November air surged in. Sir, he asked gently. Are you sure about this? My father was sitting at the head of the table, his head in his hands. My mother was silently sobbing. Chris was gazing at his plate, and Michael looked at me with an apology in his eyes. Yes, I answered. I'm certain. We strolled out to the driveway, where Andrew's black Mercedes and Rachel's Audi were parked alongside my 12-year-old Honda Accord. I'm sorry you had to see that, I told them. Don't be, Rachel firmly stated. He deserved it. Still, I said. Family is complicated. Speaking of which, Andrew stated cautiously. About the restructuring plans for the Parker and Sons subsidiary. Don't fire him, I responded instantly. Andrew lifted his eyebrow. Don't fire my dad or my brothers, I clarified. Keep them right where they are. Same positions, same pay. Ethan, your dad just... I understand what he did, but my mother does not deserve to lose her house because her husband is a... Reed and my brothers have spouses, children, and mortgages. I shake my head. I did not do this to ruin their finances. I did it to make a point. Victoria wondered what the message was. That success isn't one size fits all, that real work comes in many forms, and that maybe, just maybe, he should have believed in his son. Andrew gave me a long look, then grinned slightly. You're a better man than I would be in your position. Maybe. Or perhaps I'm simply weary of being furious. For what it's worth, Rachel replied. Your father was mistaken. What you created was remarkable. The transaction netted Stratton $53 million in the first year alone. When Andrew departs, the board refers to you as the heir apparent. I appreciate it. Although, Andrew said with a chuckle, you probably could have told us this was your family before we walked into an ambush. Where's the fun in that? We spoke for a few more minutes about work, Q4 estimates, the Christmas party next month, regular and professional topics, the type of conversation I had every day with people who valued what I did. They departed at 7:35 p.m. I sat in my Honda for a long, admiring the warm light from my parents' home and listening to the muted sounds of conversation within. My phone vibrated, indicating a text message from Michael. Can we talk? I typed back. Not tonight. Another buzz. Chris, I apologize. I should have said something. I did not react to that one. A third buzz. My mother, please come back inside. Your father wants to talk. I started the engine and drove off. The following day my phone would not stop ringing. I ignored the most of the calls, but I ultimately listened to the voicemails. My father's voice was shaking. Hey, Ethan, I'm not sure what to say. I was mistaken. Please call back. We need to talk. My mother. Sweetheart, your dad is distraught. He's been up all night. Please give him an opportunity to apologize appropriately. Uncle John. Hello, Ethan. Listen, your father phoned me this morning. He's a disaster. I know he was harsh on you yesterday, but give him some slack. He's proud. You know, it's difficult for guys like us to confess our mistakes. I removed them all. A week later, my father arrived at my office. Gloria Martinez, my executive assistant with 28 years of expertise who manages my calendar like a military operation, buzzed me. Mr. Parker, there is a Robert Parker here to see you. He does not have an appointment. Send him in. My father stepped into my office and paused. Just paused and stared. The office was on the 47th story of the Columbia Center in Seattle, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Puget Sound, original artwork on the walls, and a custom-made desk from Italy, all tailored to reflect precisely what I had accomplished. Jesus, he muttered. Have a seat, Dad. He sat in one of the leather seats across from my desk, looking tiny and out of place with his work boots on the polished hardwood floor and his plaid shirt in a location built for suits and silk ties. I came to apologize, he explained. Okay, that's everything. Just okay. Dad, what do you want me to say? That everything is okay, and that you did not spend 32 years making me feel inadequate? He flinched. I never meant... Yes. You did. You definitely meant it. You always introduce me to someone as my son, the consultant, in that tone, as if it were a terrible word. Every time you compliment Chris and Michael on their real jobs while dismissing my efforts. You always made it plain that until I was working with my hands, I wasn't actually working. I didn't understand what you were doing, he said gently. You did not strive to comprehend. There is a difference. He remained quiet for a long time. Then you're correct. I did not try. I was threatened. I felt intimidated by you, by what you were doing, and by the fact that you were doing something I didn't comprehend, which meant you were entering a world I couldn't follow. He massaged his face with both hands. Your brothers are doing what I did. Building. I get it. I can provide them advice and share my expertise. But you went someplace I couldn't go. And instead of taking pride in that, I was unkind. I finished. Yeah, I was cruel. I leaned back in my chair, staring at this man who had appeared like a giant to me as a youngster, so powerful and sure of himself. Now he merely seemed exhausted. Did you know, I asked, that on my 16th birthday, you told me I'd never amount to anything because I preferred reading to working on construction sites? Jesus, Ethan. Or when I got accepted to UW with a scholarship, you said college was a waste of time for someone like me. I was wrong. Or when I told you about my first client, you laughed and said I'd be bankrupt in 6 months. He didn't answer, just sat there and took it. I kept waiting for the time when you'd finally say, I'm proud of you, son. But it never came. Not even when I got my 50th customer. Not when Forbes featured my firm in an article on creative companies. Not when I sold the firm for enough money to retire at 30. Nothing I accomplished was ever sufficient. Because I'm an idiot. He answered slowly. Because I'm a stupid, stubborn old man who doesn't know how to say the things he should say. That's not good enough, Dad. I know. He glanced at me with burning eyes. I know it isn't, but I'm going to say it anyway. I am proud of you. I'm proud of what you created. I am proud of the guy you have become. And I apologize. I'm really sorry I waited until you humiliated me in front of the entire family before admitting it. The hush stretched between us. What do you want from me? I asked finally. A chance, he said. A chance to do better, to be better, to actually be the father you deserved instead of the one you got. I stared out the window at the Seattle cityscape, the gray waters of Puget Sound, and the mountains in the distance. I don't know if I can do that, I said honestly. I don't know if I can just forgive 32 years because you finally realized you were wrong. I am not seeking for forgiveness. Not yet. I'm only asking for an opportunity to earn it. I turned around to face him. What does that look like? I do not know. Maybe Sunday meals for you and me. It's just us. There are no brothers, uncles, or audience, just two people eating and conversing. I'd want to hear about your job. Really? No, I don't want to judge it. I want to understand what my son does, and if I say no, I will understand, but I'll keep trying because you're my son, and I love you. And I should have said that a hell of a lot more than I did. I sat with it for a while. One supper, I eventually answered. One Sunday dinner. You ask real questions. You truly listen. You don't compare what I do to construction or say I should do something different. If you can do that, if you can get through one meal without making me feel inadequate, perhaps we can try again. He nodded, relieved expression on his face. I can do that. And Dad, if you embarrass me like that again, we're done. I don't care if you are family. I do not care if Mom begs. We're finished. Understood? Understood? He stood to go and halted at the door. That thing you said at Thanksgiving, he recalled. About making more last year than I'll make in my career. How about it? Was this true? Yeah, it was true. He nodded slowly. Jesus. Then excellent for you, son. Sincerely. Good for you. After he departed, I stayed in my office for a while, watching the sun set over the ocean. Gloria buzzed me. Mr. Parker, it's 4 p.m. is here. Send them in. And I returned to work. My father may finally be learning to appreciate this type of work. 3 months later, I was enjoying Sunday dinner with my father at a quiet Italian restaurant in Fremont. We'd been doing this every week since that day in my workplace. The first supper was stiff and awkward, the second marginally better, and by the fourth, we were really conversing. Tell me about the Benson project, he asked, cutting his chicken marsala. I informed him that I couldn't share individual contracts owing to confidentiality, but I had begun discussing basic principles, describing how supply chain optimization works, and leading him through the tactics we utilized. It's interesting, he replied after I described how we addressed a particularly challenging logistical challenge. I never considered it that way. The timing of delivery, storage expenses, and labor schedules are all connected. That is exactly it. Everything links. One delay causes a chain reaction of difficulties. We could have used someone like you at Parker & Sons 20 years ago. You had someone like me, I continued gently. But you just didn't listen. He set down his fork. You're correct. You attempted to inform me about inefficiencies in our supply chain when you were 22, right? 23? The summer after I graduated, I ordered you to stop up and let the men who understood what they were doing handle it. Yeah, I apologize. I understand. We ate silently for a time, then he inquired. Are you happy? The question astonished me. What? Are you satisfied with everything in your life, including your career? I thought about it. Yes, I believe I am. It's difficult and sometimes taxing, but I enjoy what I do. I enjoy problem solving, creating systems, and making things more efficient. That's excellent, he responded. All I ever wanted was for you boys to be happy. I just had a dumb, restricted image of what happiness should be like. Do you know what made me happy? I said. Last week you inquired about my work without passing judgment. I was pleased that you listened to my explanation without attempting to connect it to building. He grinned, a genuine smile rather than the artificial ones he had previously displayed. Then I'll keep doing that. 6 months after Thanksgiving, my mother called. Ethan, honey, would you want to come to Sunday dinner? Not in the restaurant. Here at home. I do not know, Mom. Chris and Michael want to apologize properly. Your father spoke to them. Really? Talk with them. They now realize what they did wrong. I paused. Please, she was saying. Give them a chance like you gave your father a chance. So I went. When I got in, Chris and Michael were waiting in the living room, both standing up. Hey, Chris began hesitantly. Thank you for coming. What is this about? We're sorry, Michael replied. For Thanksgiving and all the other times. For treating you as if your accomplishment wasn't important since it wasn't construction. We've been talking to Dad, Chris told us. About what you do, about what you built, and we realized we were assholes. Yes, I answered. You were. Michael responded. We'd like to change that if you'll let us. I looked at my brothers, who were both in their early 30s, had kids, and were visibly uncomfortable but trying hard. Okay, I responded. Finally, we can try. We had dinner, and while there were awkward silences and times of stress, it was better and different. As I was leaving, my father led me to my car. Thank you, he was saying, for coming tonight, for giving them a chance. Do not thank me yet. Let's see whether they genuinely change. They will because they saw what I almost lost. He took a break. I almost lost my son because I was too stubborn to admit I was wrong. They don't want to make the same mistake. I got into my automobile but did not immediately start the engine. Dad. Yeah? How did you feel when Andrew stepped in on Thanksgiving and addressed me as sir? He was silent for a long time. Then shame. Completely unbearable shame. Because at that point, I realized I knew nothing about my own son, while everyone else witnessed what you'd accomplished. But I was so preoccupied evaluating you that I never looked. Good, I answered. Do you remember that feeling? Because if you ever make me feel little again, that's where we'll wind up, with you knowing nothing about me because I won't give you the opportunity. I understand. I drove home thinking about how bizarre it was that the moment designed to disgrace my father had instead began to restore our relationship. That the worst Thanksgiving of my life resulted in the finest 6 months. A year after the supper, Andrew announced his retirement.